Welcome back to the Conservation Cast. I'm your host, Devin George, the Communications Coordinator here at the Pike County Conservation District. Thank you all so much for listening in to our Septic episode. In this episode, we're going to discuss the important subject of maintaining your septic system. I think this isn't a topic that automatically comes to people's minds when we discuss environmental or water quality issues, but it is incredibly important to our watersheds. For a review of water, watersheds, and water quality in Pike County, please listen to our previous episodes. My guest today is a soil scientist, professional geologist, Pennsylvania Sewage Enforcement Officer, licensed well driller, and water quality expert, Mr. Brian Oram from B.F.Environmental Consultants Incorporated. Brian, thank you for coming and talking to me today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start with, what does B.F. Environmental Consultants do?
B.F. Environmental Consultants is a private consulting firm incorporated. I actually started the business in 1989 and worked it as a sole proprietorship when I started working at Wilkes University. And then I was getting ready to leave Wilkes, I incorporated it. And what B.F. Environmental Consultants does now is private consulting practices for land development, homeowners, townships on issues of drinking water quality, drinking water supply development, managing wastewater, and other environmental issues.
What does the Clean Water Team do?
The Clean Water Team is kind of every time I do any kind of public education and outreach, I don't charge for any of that. If you want to make a donation, great. But that's what the Keystone Clean Water Team is my education outreach effort. And the other thing is it's fact-based. So if there's an issue, there's always a left and a right, and there's always extremes on the left and the right. And with any luck, you can squarely find me in the middle on the facts. And that's what I do.
Gotcha.
So I come in, and with any luck, both sides of that discussion don't like what I'm saying. And if that's the case, then I'm winning. And because that's the whole idea is to get rid of the misinformation, get to the facts, and take a process where we solve problems, not create new ones. We work on issues of primarily drinking water. That was the main mission around the Carbon County Groundwater Guardians, is getting people to test their water. But we also do things like we did this talk on septic systems. And we have a section on septic system maintenance. We have links to online training programs for people. Some are free, some of those are charged. And then we also have a couple of tools to help people diagnose their water quality, determine what to test for, and then come up with solutions.
Now, why should we manage our sewage on our on-lot septic system? What are the benefits?
So, especially being at the Pike County Conservation District, the obvious answer would be for the environment.
Yes.
And that's not the right answer, though, from my perspective. The right answer is economics. The reason why we use individual on-lot wastewater disposal is really economics. If we didn't have those tools, we'd be looking at running sewer lines throughout the regions and into rural areas, and then taking all that wastewater and concentrating it. And then we get down to, that's where the environmental issue comes into place. Taking all that water, concentrating, then discharging into our surface water. If we keep the water back up in the watershed, we have the ability to not only use it, but then recharge it right back in the headwaters. So, my big thing is, my first thing would be cost. The cost of the infrastructure, the cost of maintenance. The next one would be health in the environment, so the people living there and the animals in the community. And the second thing would be just the environment we create, because we all live downstream. So not just the people that live here, but the people that live downstream from us. And then finally, if you take wastewater or waste and run it through the soil and run it through the groundwater cycle, you actually deal with things like endocrine disruptors, pharmaceuticals, phosphate, nitrates, in a way that doesn't adversely affect the stream. So because if the option is, hey, I can treat this water and put it in the stream, or hey, I can treat this water a little, maybe to a lesser extent, and then recharge it, and in 20 years it gets to the stream, I'll pick that choice any day.
Right. And if you want to know what we mean when we say we all live downstream, you can listen to my first episode with Rachel Posovitz, where we talk all about what it means to live downstream and why recharge is so important. What about sewage? Why would we want to manage that with the septic system?
It's the same. Again, the first thing is infrastructure cost, and then finally health. I mean, we're talking about sewage not only has many different types of waterborne diseases in it. We have E. coli, we have Giardia, Cryptosporidium. So that's the biggest thing. Again, managing that. And then now, with respect to watershed issues, the biggest issue would be phosphate. If we take sewage and send it directly to a stream, you're not going to trap the phosphate, but if we take the sewage, run it through a septic system, let it go through the soil, the phosphate actually gets trapped, mineralized in the soil. And then the same thing with nitrates. We have an option of putting the sewage in the stream. We have an issue with nitrate and ammonia, but again, if we put it through the hydrological cycle, it's likely going to denitrify. So again, more cost-effective way to deal with pollutants and those environmental impacts.
What regulations are there on on-lot septic systems?
So there's a layers of regulations. Probably the most holistic would be Act 537. Act 537 requires the management agencies, usually local, that would be townships, boroughs, to have a wastewater management plan of how are they going to deal with wastewater in their service area. So that could be using only on-lot septic systems. It could be one part of the area is septic systems, another part could be a centralized treatment system with a stream discharge or other discharge. Or it could be a community collection system, a sewage system, again going to a central treatment plant. So we have a statewide regs that then lead to a local agency providing specific ordinances or regulations regarding sewage. So if in this area we'll have Act 537 and our local townships or municipalities will have ordinances related to on-lot sewage.
You mentioned several different types of septic systems. What are the typical systems that we'd find here in the Poconos?
So your typical system would be, people drive around and see these mounds next to people's houses. They're called elevated sand mounds. They're used in areas where the depth to the seasonal high water table was relatively high. And what it does was it raises the level where treatment of the sewage occurs. So the reason why the mound's up above ground is the water goes into the septic system, the top of the system, into a gravel bed, and then it goes through about 20 inches or more of new material, and then recharges it into the ground. So that's probably very common. Some people find them aesthetically unpleasing because they're very high, especially if you have a small lot and next to you, the septic system is higher than your windows. The other thing, we have some newer septic systems now. I really don't know if I want to call them septic systems. They actually have front-end pre-treatment. So rather than dealing with the need for additional treatment by going through some additional fill sand, they actually treat that water in a tank. And then you don't have to have that fill sand material, and so they're shallower. So the biggest difference between those is they tend to be long, narrow, very shallow systems. And now we also have some drip irrigation systems. And another system that we have up in the area is commonly not used for residents, but we have them used on schools. The jail has it. It is a spray irrigation system.
The jail in Milford?
The jail in Milford, the jail up here, yes.
Okay.
They have so all their water gets treated at the plant up there, and a portion of the water during the summer season, gets spray irrigated, and during non-spray periods, it goes to the stream. And we also have some schools like Shohola Elementary School, is all the water from the school actually gets treated via spray irrigation. And if you can't spray it, you'll store it. So there's a lot of those. I think right now my biggest spray irrigation system in the Poconos has a capacity of about 500,000 gallons a day, and that's for Mount Pocono Borough. So again, down there, the borough, beyond that, they'll discharge. But now 500,000 gallons per day is going to recharge back into the aquifer, and it won't see the stream for 20 to 40 years. So rather than, again, the idea is let's go through the hydraulic cycle. So we're recharging, we're polishing that water, we're dealing with the nutrients, we're dealing with waterborne disease, etc. And then in really old places, we have the, hopefully that wouldn't be getting rid of those, those would be the old tanks where you had a 55-gallon drum, septic tank only with a pipe. And then probably the weirdest septic system I've ever seen up in the Poconos was in Barrett Township back in 1986. There was a woman that lived near a quarry, and when I was doing a survey in the area, and she says, "Oh yeah, let me show you." So I come out, we go right to her house, to the back of her house, and there's a metal grate. You move the metal grate, and there's a 20-foot pit and rock. And she goes, "That's my septic system, and I put a pound of ground chuck in it every year." And hey, she was a single older woman that lived there, and that's what she had.
So obviously not what you just described, but what would you describe as a conventional system? What would that look like?
Well, now that's one of the things that's kind of challenging in the regs is that there was a recent change in the regs that would permit systems that have been approved by DEP to meet what's considered conventional. So right now, if you look at the regulations, in the regulations themselves, there's a list of septic systems, like the elevated sand mound, an in-ground system, a trench system, spray irrigation. They're in there, and they're considered typically conventional. But recently there was a law passed that said these series of alternative systems that were approved by DEP and have been working should be classified as conventional. The law passed, but there's some question on the terms. So in general, I would probably say conventional systems would be considered, the old in-ground systems, the elevated sand mounds, the spray irrigation systems, things that can be found in law. I think probably the guys that install them would probably hear this and yell at me for saying that because the law's changed. But that's how people would think about them. But there's a whole series of alternative systems that, again, don't require all the sand, don't require the material, have more front-end treatment, require maintenance. The alternative that work probably better than what we consider conventional. They do cost a bit more, though.
It's always the trade-off.
Yes.
Of innovation. What are the keys to proper system operation?
Well, I think overall the keys have to go back to the original planning and approval structure. So they require, as I mentioned, the statewide regs. They create a platform for how we're going to manage these systems. How we're going to permit these systems, how we're going to site them, and how we're going to design them. So the first level is having that platform, that platter, if you will. The next level would be the local townships that have ordinances that go through the details of how to put that platter together. Where does everything go? And then finally, it is really up to the homeowner to, not put the wrong things down the toilet, not abuse it. So, if you're planning to come up here and build a 3-bedroom home, but you have 12 people going to live there, so you got to tell somebody up front, or at least somebody should ask you. And if you're going to go in and put these high-use water use devices in your home, you need to do that in advance. Talk about what they are, and a couple of quick housekeeping things, like cigarettes butts don't go in the septic system. Don't go in the septic system. Towels don't go in the septic system. Toys don't go in the septic system. Preferably grease doesn't go into the septic system. Take that out. And then finally, these wipes people use.
Like baby wipes, yeah.
Baby wipes, they don't go in the septic system. Even if they say septic system suitable, they don't go in the septic system because they break down. I know, so again, my daughter has Crohn's, so I got the wipes. They have to go in the trash can if you're on a septic system. So it might seem a little disgusting, but you can't put them in the septic tank because they don't decompose. So,
and by high water use appliances, you mean our dishwashers, laundry machines?
well, no, I mean, a big high water use device would be like, these cascade showers that, when you take a shower, it feels like you're standing underneath a waterfall. These higher end, in-house jacuzzi pools. So when you dump that, you're not dumping 25 gallons of water, it's 50 or 100. So those kind of high water use devices, that way. So it's not so much having a dishwasher. I mean, again, if you have a, dishwasher, washing clothes, the issue with that is how you do those things. So try to avoid laundry day, and spread out the use. So I would probably say, we're going back to that previous question, what's the difference between conventional and some of the alternatives? Conventional systems, the way they're operated is, the water goes into the tank and water goes out. The alternative systems, the water goes in and then it's time dosed out. So the idea that time dosing the system. So that if you're on a conventional elevated sand down, you don't have the ability to time dose it, so you have to time dose it by spreading out your uses. So rather than laundry day, we do a little laundry every day, rather than filling it up all at once.
All right.
And then the last thing would be the maintenance. Either you have to have somebody come and pump the septic tank every 3 to 5 years, depending on your use. Take a look at it, see if the lines are clogged. Like I have a beard, so hairs will clog some of the pipes and the holes in the pipe. Some of the products we use will clog those holes, so they need to be cleaned out.
So you had just mentioned, hairs clogging some of the holes in the pipes. What are some of the most common causes of a malfunction of a septic system?
So the biggest one is not doing the maintenance, lack of pumping the tank out itself. I was doing a septic system survey in the Hazleton area. I met one man that's never pumped his tank out at all. He said it works fine. And I said, it works fine until it won't. And one day that's going to just be filled up and clogged and it won't work anymore. So that's usually the first one, is that it's not maintained. You're putting too much solids in, the solids build up in the tank, or grease builds up. That grease or solids then moves to the bed, that gets clogged, and over time, at some point, it comes out to the surface, or it backflows into the house, or it does something. The next one is hydraulic overload, where too much water was getting in. That could be because there's a crack in the pipe, a leak into the tank, or a lot of usage, the water running, the toilet running, excessive use. A great example would be a lot of times people will buy a 3-bedroom home and have 6 people living there. Well, that's hydraulic overload. Now, it's still a 3-bedroom house. Our regs say that's 400 gallons a day. You got 6 people there, though. That's not going to be 400 gallons a day peak flow. So hydraulic overload, or adding an appliance. So you're adding a water treatment system that backwashes. So that's going to add more water usage than it was originally planned, maybe. So depending on what you have. So we got hydraulic overload. The other type of overload wouldn't be just hydraulic overload, but mass overload. The way these septic systems work is we're putting food in, and the bacteria in there are breaking it down. So if we put too much food in too fast, the bacteria can't break it down, and so it decomposes anaerobically and creates slime layers. And then that causes the bed to fail. Or we put in things like hairs, certain laundry detergents, things like that create a clogging layer, and then that clogs the system up. So you can get hydraulic overload that way. The next source would be the location where the septic system is getting inundated by surface water runoff. So, we built the house, we put the septic system in, and now the roof gutters from the house discharge immediately upgrading to the septic system. And the runoff from the development now drains over where the septic system is. And so we have this hydraulic overload because of too much surface water. There's a number of aerobic treatment tanks where people just, you're a seasonal use house and they shut them off. Can't do that. They go anaerobic, and then when you kick them back on, you actually will dump solids into the bed. So they're probably the most common. Oh, and the last one is physical damage. So the best one I've seen is either people parking on, because it's a great flat spot to park my car, or the best one was a satellite dish was installed right in the bed. And so those are most of what they are caused by.
All right, and so these are some of the causes of malfunctions.
Yeah.
And then what are some of the bad things that can happen if you don't maintain your system?
Well, if you don't maintain your system, the first bad thing that can happen is it can back up in your house. That'd be bad.
Mm-hmm.
It can back up in your yard. It can show up in the neighbor's yard. Your kids could come in and say, "Hey, Mom, it's all wet outside." And then whatever disease they get after that. And then finally, what it does in the environment. Those are the things that go bad. And then if you think about all those things, why I put money first is because they all have a cha-ching next to them.
Yes.
If my sewage ends up in the neighbor's yard, ka-ching, I not only have to fix it, but now I got to deal with him or her and their lawyer, and they're upset, and they rightly so. And if my kids get into it, rightly so, they're sick potentially. They've been exposed to a health hazard, even if it might be only our own sewage. They're not exposed to a waterborne disease that way. Or my pet. People. I was reading a book, 12 Rules for Life. It was written by a psychologist in Canada, and he was like, he has patients, and he was like, he couldn't get his. I guess he had a difficulty people paying to get their meds, and he started talking to him, and he found out that the people that would make sure their dogs got their medication, but they wouldn't take their medication. And it basically came down to is a dog's a dog, or your pet's a pet. They're not perfect. They act like pets, like kill mice. They do things, but they're dogs and cats. And when we do things, we get upset with ourselves, and we don't like ourselves that much sometimes, but we always love our pets. So when our pets are sick, they'll get taken care of. When we're sick, we don't like ourselves that much, so we'll take care of the dog first. And we have to think that way. When we take care of that septic system and do the right thing, we're taking care of ourselves. And when we take care of ourselves, that means we're making an effort to take care of the community. When we do that, when we take care of the community, we take care of the animals in the community. And again, it gets back to that. We all live downstream. Because if we can have that logic without being enforced by government, and we all agree that we're going to try to do things that take care of ourselves, which impact take care of each other, we don't need somebody in government to tell us what to do so much to solve a problem, because we're going to solve them. So again, that's why I like the idea that we all live downstream, that we're all in this together in many respects.
Yeah, a good way to think of a reason to do something is always to take care of your pet. I like that.
Yeah. Again, because you're willing. I mean, I do anything for her. Like, I yell at her. And, it's time to feed her. She's kind of voiceful. But it's truthfully that. That we all, we think more of sometimes the things we take care of more than ourselves. And again, having a malfunctioning septic system is not a cheap issue. I mean, you could easily look at spending $30,000 to $40,000 to fix it. Yeah, nobody wants that headache.
That's a big incentive for maintenance, for sure.
And then more importantly, it's a big incentive to make sure that if you're buying a home up here, that you get it properly inspected by someone that's a qualified inspector. That to not look just at the house, but look at the infrastructure of the house. Where's the water coming from? Where's the sewage going? Because a lot of people haven't had any experience with that at all. They come from an urban area that have central water and central sewage. They come up here. That's why I've advocated for townships that when we buy a house, we get a package that goes with the house. Here's what you have. You have a well. Here's how deep it is. Here's where your pump is. This is how much casing. Here's your water test. You have a septic system. It needs to be pumped out every 3 years. Give them, what do you have to do? And I think if you tell people what they have to do, or at least give them guides on what they have to do, and you give them framework to work in, they'll do those things. But if you come out with a hammer, it doesn't work.
Never.
No. But if you have a talk where people can come and get a coffee and some sugar for free and have a nice talk about things they should do, that's better than a hammer.
Always. Sugar's always better than a hammer.
Sure.
So before it backs up in your yard or before it backs up into your house, are there some warning signs that we can look out for that might indicate a problem with our system?
There could be. It depends on what you have. So the type of system. So if you have a system with without a pump, so a very old in-ground system, it's likely you're going to have slow drains. You might see water daylighting in the yard. You might see just wet spots in the yard. Slight odors, high green grass. And so you look at the yard and it's like, hey, my septic is over and over there, and the grass is really brilliant green, but I can't grow grass over here. Mm-hmm. Hint, hint. And I tried to run the lawnmower and the wheels go in. Or hey, there's a metallic sheen on the surface and it kind of stinks. So there are all the levels of warning signs. You really have a headache when you can't flush. Slow drains, obviously daylighting outside, but there are, malfunctions that you don't see. So malfunction that you don't see would be the water goes into the tank has a hole in it, and it's sitting on rock and it goes into the aquifer. Or the water goes into the bed and it's shallow depth to bedrock, and so it really doesn't get renovated, and it goes into the aquifer. And the only way to evaluate those is to do, water testing. So, we recommend people in rural areas to do a pretty comprehensive water test when you move in, so you know what problems you have, and then do an annual screening test just to see if it's changed. And that's the only way to really know how things are working.
And what do you mean by daylighting in your yard?
Well, it comes to the surface. So you might actually
you can see it in the day.
Yeah. So what I mean is, at times, at times you'll just see a wet surface. But for example, if you have a septic system with a pump, the water will be pumped in and it'll actually get pumped right out. So daylighting, where you actually see a stream of water flowing or wetness, actual surface seepage.
All right. So do not ignore weird smells around your home.
No. I mean, after you tell your husband to take a bath, and say, hey, honey, when's the last time? And there can be smells too that are normal, like. So if the septic tank, if you have the tank and you can get odors from the tank, and that might mean that the venting system for the house has an issue, where the gases from the tank aren't coming back through the sewer line, venting out your roof, that it wasn't set up that way, or that it wasn't adequate. So you might get gases evolved from the tank. So you might have some odors that way. But then, again, part of the work should be every 3 to 5 years have an inspection done. When you pump the tank out, how's it look? Are the baffles in the tank okay? How much sludge was there? Okay, I have a dosing pump. How does that chamber look? Do you see a lot of solids in there? So hiring a good inspector for that is going to be invaluable.
All right. So besides not ignoring smells, what are some of the other do nots that you don't want to do with your septic system?
Okay, probably for the first one would be try to stay away from really, as I mentioned, like concentrated use. So when I lived up in, my last house was in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, and what I used to do is when we'd have parties, I'd have the septic tank. That was one of the things, we'd have the septic tank pump, but then I would bring it, if it was a big party, actually hire in urinals for the men to go outside. The only problem is that most of the time they didn't use them. But you put the urinals over by the beer, so they can hang out over there and they solve that. But watch volume, high peak use, so that, when you're coming up to Christmas time and things like that. And watching the appliances you put in terms of, and fixtures in terms of large, waterfall showers. Garbage grinders, in my opinion, are bad. Don't use them. So if you have something that can take out the solids, we don't want to grind them up and put them in the septic tank. We want to take them out, screen them, and dispose of them as solid material. We don't want to plant trees. I like trees. Trees are good. But I don't want to plant trees on an elevated sand down. I don't want to plant trees in the berm. I mean, native grasses, wildflowers. We don't want to do anything over that where we put big roots into it that could die because that can create conduits. You don't need to, add stuff to your septic tank, like those cleaners and enzymes. You don't need those. Some restaurants might need those, but most humans don't. We don't have to add things like that. Household products you use, maybe try to avoid some of the more caustic ones, like high chlorine, things with really high pH. Don't pour them in. If you use those kind of products, use them as directed. Don't put them a lot more. But there's a lot greener products that will do the same job, that have less of a negative impact on the enzymes in the tank. And then finally, as I mentioned before, we don't want to turn off any kind of aerobic tanks. They should be on. And again, products we use, the big ones, shampoos, sometimes the detergents, how much we use. So we don't want to use too much, or we can actually create clogging layers in the system. For example, hair shouldn't go down the drain. Beard guy, you take that out. You might cut my beard hair over the sink, but I put a towel down and.
Or get one of those little grates for your shower that catches all the
yes.
hair. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say one of those beard trimmer things
that
I saw on TV. I was like, I don't know who you are if you're going to wear a beard trimmer to trim your beard.
No.
I think I'd go outside.
Just trying to protect my shower drain.
Yeah.
So how often should we be pumping out our septic tank? I think you said it earlier, but can you tell us again how
Sure.
often?
Yeah, Penn State has a really nice fact sheet on this, and you can probably type it and find it on the internet. But it's a function of how big your septic tank is and how many users are there. So again, typically up in the Poconos, most septic tanks are about 1,000 gallons, and we have about 3 people living in there in that system. And so about every 3 years would be good for that. If we have more people, we have to do it more often. So for example, a 1,000-gallon tank, 5 people living there, you'd have to pump out that tank every 2 years. I think also during the presentation we gave a talk, and a copy of it's online, and we'll probably talk about the end. But on there is the whole presentation, and I think there's a table in there, that presentation.
So now that we know the things that we can't do, and we know that we should be pumping it out every 3 years, what are some other do's, things that we should be doing with our septic system?
Well, the first thing to do, so if you live there, the first thing to do is when you find out there's a talk by me, you come, or whomever. Come and learn about, and if you don't know about what you have, you have a septic system, and don't know much about it, the first thing is ask. So if there's an education event, you ask. If there's not an education event, you go to your local township and talk to the township sewage enforcement officer and say, hey, I bought a house, and it was the septic system was put in around this time. Do you have to have a copy of the permit that was issued for that system? Could I pay to get a copy of that document? Because it'll have the design, it'll tell you how big it is, it should tell you where it's at, so you can get the information. So that's first, is learn.
Knowledge is power, always.
Learn what you have. The next thing is after you learn, so that's assuming that that's assuming that you already have a house. Now, if you don't have a house and you're coming up here, I talk to real estate agents, I talk to builders, and part of the Builders Association up here. And so we encourage the builders to educate and inform. So if you're coming up here, you should also learn. Learn about what kind of system you have, and be honest about what you perceive to be your current needs and your future needs. So if you see yourself right now needing a 3-bedroom house but moving into a 4 or 5, over time you're looking at saying, hey, we're going to build this house and we got this extra room over here, we're going to call it the office, and that's a future bedroom. Well, let's plan for that up front. Let's get that system permitted for that potential flow. The next one would be things that would be taken care of, hopefully by the township SEO and the person putting the system in. So hopefully the system's been properly sited and designed. And that would be, the job and the role of the sewage enforcement officer of your township, maybe at times working with a consultant and a contractor. So making sure the system is being put in, not under wet conditions, we're not smearing the surfaces, we're not damaging the soil structure. Where the system is put in to meet standards, so it's inspected. After it gets put in, it's tested to make sure it works. We're ensured that my preference is that when we permit, we have a replacement area. So if we are told we have a replacement area, the buyer should know where that is so that they don't go over there and cut all the trees down, make a gravel parking lot, start a campfire, and destroy that area. And then, the biggest then after that is maintenance. Just, following the maintenance program. And if you don't know, ask. Anybody can always call me and ask me a question. And I'll do my best to always answer or guide them in the right direction. But, the best thing to do is ask. But doing the proper maintenance and finding out what that maintenance needs to be is important.
All right. So there are a lot of resources out there, as you mentioned. And I will have a list of website resources that Brian's recommended available on our podcast page on the Pike County Conservation District website. And I want to thank Brian for coming in today and talking to us. Thank you so much.
Hey, no problem. Happy to do it.
And you can find more information on B.F.Environmental Consultants at their website, www.bfenvironmental.com. And for more information on Keystone Clean Water Team, you can join their Facebook group called Keystone Clean Water Team. If you would like to review this information or go more in depth, go to www.carbonwaters.org, where you can download a presentation with this information and more. And I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of the Conservation Cast. As a reminder, all our episodes are available on our website, www.pikeconservation.org, and on iTunes. Just search the Conservation Cast and hit subscribe to hear our future episodes. Financial and other support for this podcast has been provided by the Department of Environmental Protection's 2019 Environmental Education Grants Program. And we'll talk to you all next time here on the Conservation Cast.